You know, I find it is often said you can't change the people around you. That you can only change yourself, and somehow that knowledge is supposed to help you attain inner peace or some BS like that. I'll be the first to admit there's a kernel of truth there. What you can't control is how people respond to the choices you make, though you are free to make those choices however you wish to. For me, the biggest hurdle I've faced is that the people around me have always responded negatively to the decisions I have made, regardless of my intentions. I've only ever wanted to help the people around me, but those very same people see someone they consider a freak and can only assume the worst in me. As such, every good deed I try to do gets twisted into some kind of malicious intent, and I'm treated as a criminal. I think it's pretty ironic, and in some cases, it's actually quite fitting for my channel, a channel that is literally about crime and punishment. And the more I think about it, the more I find myself looking at people who are considered criminals or outright villains. And despite their actions being reviled by the rest of society, the outcomes of those actions are often surprisingly to the benefit of the people who least understand them. Let's take The Crew for example, since these road trip talks always take place in this setting anyway. According to the game's lore, the 510 Motor Club was a national crime syndicate with over 650 active members. Besides the obvious street racing, they engaged in drug and weapons trafficking, some collusion with corrupt members of law enforcement, and of course, killing anyone who might interfere with them. Yet throughout the story, you meet a whole bunch of people who are part of the syndicate at its lowest levels, who essentially joined on because there were things going on in their lives that they couldn't face alone. They may not have agreed with everything going on at the top, but even they couldn't deny there was strength in numbers, and joining did give them more power than they had previously, as well as an environment where they could do the things that they wanted to do. And I think a lot of other series are out there where you catch a glimpse of this kind of lore, but as the player, you're meant to disregard it. The Hitman series is full of crime syndicates like Ether and Providence and Dexter Industries. You spend each game taking out low-level grunts, but you can eavesdrop on them and see for yourself that these people feel like working for these syndicates gives them a sense of purpose and stability. And on the macro societal level, that's kind of a good thing, because it keeps people fed and housed, and in some respects, they're still contributing to society. Someone working for your archetypal villain corp still pays their taxes, still shops at the same supermarkets you do, and Villain Corp is still churning out products that drive technology and innovation. And all of this kind of makes me think, if I were part of a criminal organization, a crime syndicate, if you will, that would not preclude me from doing noble things that are good for people and good for society. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start with a basic, non-negotiable ground rule number 1. Everyone in the syndicate has a place to lay their head. Like, it surprises me that this isn't just a fundamental rule of society. If you're working for someone, then they should have an implied social contract to ensure you're not living on the street. It's almost ironic, because back in the days of feudalism and serfdom and all the other forms of indentured servitude, which were barely 2 steps above human slavery, you could at least say you were guaranteed a bed to sleep in and a roof over your head. Side note, just to clarify for those of you who fell asleep in history class, indentured servitude was in fact not the same as slavery. Indentured servitude was a contract, usually a loan, paid back by being someone's live-in servant. Slavery was the forced imprisonment of humans without their consent in exchange for literally nothing in return. TLDR, indentured servants still had rights, slaves did not have rights. Now back to this idea of everyone having their own living space. It's not just about having a bed to sleep in. There also needs to be a personal storage accommodation for people's belongings, such as clothing and leisure items, and this space should also accommodate a certain degree of privacy. This could be as simple as room partitioning or as intricate as individualized buildings laid out in a row. Hell, if a syndicate wants to kill two birds with one stone, they could always run a hotel as the legitimate cover business and put up their associates in the hotel indefinitely as compensation. This was actually something I invoked in a novel I once wrote, and maybe I'll talk about that in another video since it was one of the novels I originally made videos for the first time I set up this YouTube channel, but I'd rather not get ahead of myself. The point being that by running this syndicate, you're already doing a good by giving people a job and keeping them out of potential homelessness. So let's talk about the second fundamental ground rule here. The syndicate invests in itself. On the one hand, there are many things that the syndicate will be able to produce given its access to the factors of production, land, labor, capital. For all the things it cannot produce, it is still able to purchase those things in bulk, usually at a discount. The syndicate can then pass those savings onto its members by allowing its members to purchase goods at the same reduced unit cost. But it can get a bit more nuanced than that even, if the members are able to file, say, requisition requests, allowing for direct compensation in goods instead of in money. The market value of those goods can even be used as a tax deduction because had these members been paid in money, that money would have been spent on those items in order to, survive. Because the syndicate itself becomes the owner and the distributor of those goods, the syndicate as an organization would bear the brunt of the tax burden, not its members. This ensures that those at the very top are paying their fair share. It might seem strange to talk about a criminal organization doing their civic duty, but it is truth in television. The IRS doesn't really care how you get your income, only that you report it accurately every year, and that you pay your dues every year. Our system is weird, don't even bother trying to question it. So, we've given everyone a job, a place to sleep, and to store their personal belongings, and to have privacy, and everyone has access to the goods and services they need under the syndicate umbrella. So far, so good, so what's next? Ground rule number 3, respect and tolerance. When I think about this tenet, I think about anime like Black Lagoon or Cowboy Bebop especially. What's interesting about syndicates is they are diverse, a lot more so than the rest of orthodox society. When you put a bunch of people together who all have sordid pasts, it creates something of a level playing field. For example, if you got your start selling weapons, you can't judge someone who got their start smuggling drugs. And because you're all essentially working together for the same goals on the whole, you can also look past the more superficial stuff. You won't care as much that someone is a different race or gender, or if they're religious, or whatever their politics are. After all, if you can't work together when it matters most, the syndicate will fall apart, and all of you will end up either in prison or worse. So it is in your best interest to be tolerant of people who are different. I mean, look at the city of Rawanapur from Black Lagoon. You have Catholic nuns selling weapons, you have mercenaries from literally every country on Earth, you have organized militias representing the mafia, triads, cartels, and ex-KGB, and you even have crooked cops and neo-Nazis thrown in there. Everybody low-key hates everybody else, but the city survives because of organized trade between each of the factions. Basically, it is in everyone's best interest to work together and not kill each other, so that every faction has the resources it needs to continue operations. And any faction that tries to forcibly shift that balance of power usually ends up having it backfire on them. Now, it's around this time that you may be wondering about the thesis of this little road trip rant. You must be thinking, but Maddie, are you seriously advocating for more syndicates and more organized crime? The answer may surprise you, or it may not. Put simply, no. I am not advocating for more organized crime. Drugs are bad, weapons dealing is bad, contract killing is bad, street racing is fun, but also a net negative for society. And some real-life syndicates do even more heinous things, like human trafficking. But again, if you'll recall at the start of this video, the entire thesis was people who are perceived as criminals and villains going on to do noble things. I think syndicates can exist that don't do the stereotypical syndicate things. I mean, that's not to say they wouldn't still do some bad things here and there. Maybe they're involved in corporate espionage and reverse engineer stolen proprietary tech. Maybe they're involved in market manipulation or insurance fraud. Hell, maybe they 3D print Lamborghinis. Okay, I'm kidding with that last one. 3D printing Lamborghinis is not illegal. I think the point I'm trying to make here is syndicates exist because they thrive on a given racket. They find something they can scale up and make vast sums of money on. And if they do it right, all of their members benefit. So if I could change the world, I guess I'd encourage more collectivism in society. Take people down on their luck who society has decided they don't give a damn about, and give those people a chance to do something that makes them feel whole, even if that something is a little less than orthodox. Compensate them and protect them from further harm. That is undeniably the right thing to do. And I'm gonna be honest, if the 510 Motor Club was a real thing, I would not be opposed to joining it. Like, aside from being street racers and running guns and drugs and all that shit, the 510s had this amazing intelligence network. They literally had access to satellite uplinks, which they used to relay race information to their members. I feel that being a part of that intelligence network is something I would be rather inclined toward. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I studied geographic info systems back when I was in my first year of university. So I feel like I would do well with routing and logistics. More than that, I wouldn't mind becoming a drone pilot and doing aerial reconnaissance out in the field, then relaying that info back to the higher-ups who'd use it to organize the muscle and heavy lifting of the organization. Though I'm not sure how I would feel about the mandatory neck tattoo. But that's enough out of me for one day. Thank you so much for watching.